Well, you heard the owner completely dismiss this while kind of giggling about it. Like, boy, anyone with a rational brain understands this is hocus pocus, which is interesting because his best players have come out. Just yesterday, Christian McCaffrey at the Pro Bowl said it's not nothing, and he's concerned. Kyle Juszczyk, who went to Harvard, he's concerned. I mean, a lot of players seem concerned. So you just alluded to it, but in your professional opinion, in your expert opinion, do you feel this substation is at least contributing to the Niners' outrageous injury issue?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's not doing anything positive, and it's highly likely to be doing something negative, especially because they spend so much time there. Like, again, when we're talking about dosage, we're talking about proximity and we're talking about duration. So if
Mm.
they're spending hours there, every day for weeks on end, during the off season, on season, like, obviously they're traveling a bit from time to time, and maybe it could be interesting to look at. Maybe we can see some correlations between time spent there versus when injuries are happening, and it's kind of going to be kind of spurious. So it will be hard to exactly say this is 100% the cause, and of course, injuries are going to be multifactorial anyways, but this is basically creating a foundation that is vulnerable to injury. So if we want to support players' mitochondrial function, which I'm wearing my sweater, Make Mitochondria Great Again, because that's kind of my mission, is to educate people on this, athletes, lay people. Everyone needs to know about mitochondrial health and function, because mitochondrial dysfunction is at the root of every chronic disease that we're facing in the West. So it's important for everybody to know. And EMFs are one of the things that are not talked about that are creating mitochondrial dysfunction and fomenting it over long periods of time. It would be one thing if we were just exposed impulses, but it's happening 24/7. These players are playing on this field next to the substation, and they're going home and they're surrounded by Wi-Fi, they're surrounded by 5G, they have their own power going to their home that also has that alternating current at 60 hertz, and essentially their bodies are never getting a break. And if you expect these players to perform at the highest level and demand that level of excellence from their bioenergetic systems, of course you're going to run into issues, because you're basically pushing them to the breaking point. And so, in my opinion, absolutely, this needs to be dealt with in a very serious manner. To talk about this as if it's a laughing matter is disrespectful to the players, which, in my opinion, these players are often just treated as meat and workhorses, and they're not respected as individuals, and their long term health is not considered. And I think it's a damn shame. And I'm glad that some of these players are, actually being open minded and questioning this and looking out for themselves, because, in my opinion, the league is not going to look out for them. They're not being valued as as they should. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. It's hard to say that like this is 100% the only cause of these injuries, but given how much of an outlier the Niners are with regards to injuries and the fact that this is a problem, I say do the experiment. Move them to another practice field, see what happens. Give it a season or two, see what the data looks like. If we get improvements, great. If we don't, back to the drawing board. But it seems like that at a bare minimum should be the next move.
It it does seem to me, a layperson, that when Jed York goes on and says, "Well, we've been there since 1987 and it wasn't an issue for Jerry Rice," it seems disingenuous because the world has changed so much since 1987. Forget, I mean, obviously the substation has changed a lot since 1987, but the world has changed, and now there's all these 5G things and Wi-Fi things that weren't there. So you have to account for that, and it seems like the research is uh, young, new, except for the guy you talked about from 1950.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I think people think that this isn't a very well researched space, and it really is. It's just that
Mm.
this research is not discussed. It's not openly talked about. It's not publicized. So if you look online, you can go on PubMed and you can search up EMF literature, and you'll see a ton coming from, every year back from the 50s and before up through today, but it's typically smaller journals from smaller labs that are like doing their best to contribute to this space, but it's not going to get the bells and whistles in the front page because it's not convenient. This information is very inconvenient because it will
It
make
costs people money. It doesn't make people money.
that's right. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
It makes dollars.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the problem. And this is also why this kind of needs to be a decentralized movement of people asking questions and doing research and deciding to protect themselves, because, the machine is doing its thing. It's not going to course correct because some inconvenient research is brought to light, it's like we have to each individually make decisions to try to do better in our own homes and our own lives. And, that's kind of how it is with health in general, to be honest. But this issue in particular, especially because you can't control if somebody decides to build a cell tower next to your home. Like, there's literally in the US in particular, the regulations around this are insane compared to a lot of European countries are much more strict around where cell towers can be placed, for example. Here in the US, you can put a cell tower next to a nursing home, a hospital, an elementary school. They can go anywhere. There's no consideration for the health effects. And in fact, if you look at the official stance on EMFs, they'll say, oh, yes, they're an issue, but only the thermal effects are a problem, meaning that tissue heating, because these radio frequencies like 5G, for example, there's some overlap into the microwave range. So you can get some tissue heating, tissue dehydration, which is a problem. But they fail to recognize that there is a large corpus of literature showing non-thermal effects where we're talking about, subtle mitochondrial dysfunction that is, exacerbated over time and then can foment into chronic disease states as a result of that. So, it's just, there's a lot of half truths being spun by the regulatory agencies and the powers that be, despite other countries actually taking a more strict stance on it. So it's a big problem. Like I said, like one of my goals is to really shed light on this topic and just share that there is actually a lot of data out here on this. If people are really curious and want to learn more, that they can, check out literature. I have, in addition to the book club where I've been going through the body electric and cross currents, I also have a bunch of highlight reels and posts and talking about EMFs, how to protect yourself. And we can talk about some strategies as well, because like I said, the athletes, at the very least, they need to do some things to help protect themselves in the interim. And so there are some things that we can do to help bolster the biology against these exposures.
We're going to get into that next, what the athletes can do to protect themselves, what the Niners can do to protect their athletes. Jed York mentioned waving a magic wand. I don't think that's going to be the solution.